Hello, in this video, I'm going to teach you how to make 9 people on the internet hate you. First, tell your team that you are 5 position, then pick this guy. In reality, this hero just doesn't fit the normal role system because you always end up with a ton of farm, but in your stupid team's eyes, you are a 5. Then, you murder animals, and I don't mean with this ability because that griefs the game. I mean with this one. How do you do it? First, buy a smoke at the start of the game and instantly use it when your PC loads. Don't worry about your team hating you for wasting smokes because they're too bad to know what they are. Run here if you're on Dire or here on Radiant and place a ward. We'll get to why this is important later. Then head here, spawn your boys, and send them down this path. Once you get here, leave one tree to Suicide to Tower and then move the other one to this spot. In the Dire base, there is this weird little gap between the tier 3s and tier 4s. Don't ask me why, you can email Gaben about that one. So if you're Radiant, you can simply send your treant through this gap into the enemy fountain and start massacring animals. The thing that I personally find hilarious about this is that this only works against players that are good enough to move their couriers outside of fountain for efficiency. So you're basically setting them up so they're punished for playing well, which that's a good thing if you're playing against them as your opponents. On Dire, I do the exact same thing but from this starting position, sending my trees this way instead. Once you do the suicide thing, you'll notice that there is no gap on this side, but that's okay because your tree can take 4 shots from the tier 3 before dying. Conveniently, if you run your tree this way, you only take 2 or 3 shots, meaning that you can still mass murder animals. Once you've done this, the enemies and your teammates will tip you because they're nervous since they will now believe that they're playing with a psychopath. This is only the start of the psychological torture that you are going to put them through.
Today, I shall be position 5. The sun in my leaves.
Remember that ward that I told you to place? While you're doing this tree bullshit, pay attention to that vision. Oftentimes, you'll scout the enemy for placing wards through this ward. This is important to deward. I like to start with a sentry ward just in case I see them warding, which often happens, but sending it out is fine too. Do not let them block this camp. It is your greatest tool in the laning phase and why you will always win the lane. Once laning starts, your job is to keep treants on the 4 at literally all times. Make that motherfucker hate trees.
Oh, not the trees, no!
Oh, also remember to block this camp with either your body or trees, it doesn't really matter which, don't give them this camp. Then, hit the offlaner with a Blightstone. You might be wondering, but Jenkins, is this not feeding treants? My response to that is, yeah, it is, but who gives a shit? If you feed 5 treants, it gives equivalent gold to 1 melee creep. Do you know how much HP 5 treants have? 2,500. How in Gaben's name can you soak 2,500 damage into treants and not win the lane? Rhetorical question, it's impossible. At some point, the lane will push out, and this is when you want to half pull the easy camp like this, while continuing to make the position 4 hate trees. Then, the lane will reset in front of your tower, and you start the process all over again. Congratulations, you just won your lane. You know what that sound is? That's the alarm that should play in your head every time 5 minutes pass. You know why? Because catapults spawn every 5 minutes. And this piece of shit is the best hero in the game at turning catapults into dead enemy buildings. At 5 and 10 minutes, look around at your lanes, find your strongest guy, and then spam ping the tower in the lane that he's in. Then, teleport in, spawn some trees, and go to town. But what do you do when you're not pushing towers? Well, you know that dead lane that BSJ always talks about? This is the one hero in Dota that lane is not so dead for. Your job on Nature's Prophet is to push the lane that nobody else wants to push, and farm the jungle camps that nobody else wants to farm. Sometimes you can even snipe enemy jungle camps when they're distracted doing some other shit. And this is also a god tier time to put down some super value deep vision. But heed my warning, I am serious about this. You will be very tempted to kill animals with this ward. Don't do it. This is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned on Nature's Rat over the past few years. This ward is worth way more than any donkeys. Even if you don't feel it in terms of gold, knowing that an enemy hero is here and not here means that any fight on this side of the map is good, and that is insanely valuable. However, eventually in Dota, as we all know, towers fall, people start grouping up, and then the mid-game begins. This is when you come online. This is when you can finally begin psychologically torturing the enemies, and let me tell you how. Let's assume for simplicity that you are on the Radiant, and you can just imagine that this explanation is roughly flipped for the Dire. When it comes to split pushing, I think people tend to overcomplicate it, thinking that there are many more spots that you can TP than what you really can. But technically speaking, there are only really 4 spots, or perhaps options is a better word, for where you can teleport on Nature's Prophet in the act of split pushing. That might sound weird, so let me explain. First off, you basically never want to TP mid because it just doesn't really do anything. Firstly, it is the center of the map, so on average, some enemy will be close enough to deal with you without having to use a TP. For the same reason, generally your team is already nearby to shove out that lane, so going there just kind of steals farm from them. But most importantly, if you force the enemies to TP mid, it is the closest lane to both side lanes. So, you getting someone to TP mid isn't really a gotcha like getting somebody to TP to a side lane, because you could just quickly get to wherever the hell you want to be from mid anyway. You just walk. So, for the most part, you can just eliminate the middle lane for split pushing purposes. Therefore, all we have left is the side lanes, and the infinity locations that you can TP to along them, right? No, not really. Let's say the side lane creep equilibriums are located here and here. Then you really only have 4 options, and let me tell you why. In the top lane, let's say you TP here. If you send treants down the lane, then your treants will meet the enemy creeps after the lane creeps meet. So, you will push the lane, but you will not intercept and cut the creep wave. It doesn't matter where you TP in front of the creep equilibrium, it always results in you pushing the lane, but not cutting it. Likewise, if you TP anywhere behind the creep equilibrium, your treants will meet the next enemy wave before your creep wave gets there. So, your choices are to cut or to push top. That's it. Bottom lane is the same. You can cut it by TPing behind the equilibrium, or you can push it by TPing in front of the equilibrium. Okay, so now we have our 4 options, but how do you choose what to do? Simple. Generally, I like to start with cutting because, quite frankly, it's just the most annoying, and by default, the enemy team should be playing on your side close to the equilibriums. Then, when some enemy TPs to defend where you cut, pick another option. They defended your cut top, then push bot, it's the farthest away place. Did they TP to deal with your push bot? Then just cut bot instead. If you rinse and repeat this, the enemy team will be so busy dealing with your bullshit that your team will get insanely farmed and you can pick them off. But be careful. At a certain point, they will camp your TP locations because you are being annoying. This is precisely where you start changing it up within these 4 options for where you TP to. If the last time you TP'd to cut bot, you went here, then fuck it, next time TP in and intercept the creep wave literally from inside their base. This is where you get to have fun being the whack-a-mole on Furion. While you're doing this, make sure to avoid these high ground ward spots. And you can also put your own deep vision down so that your team doesn't report you. The ideal game state is that you do this bullshit until the enemy team splits up, then you TP in and help your team in some fight where you have the numbers advantage. One of the biggest things that I've learned on Natures in the last few years is that your item build should be whatever items you need to empower your team to teamfight. I personally like Orchid because you can silence or even solo kill supports, which is always going to be useful. But you can also get aura and buff items like Medallion and Vlad's. If I don't know what to buy, I just get an Ags, because it's honestly just really OP right now for damage and disable. Buy whatever it takes to not be a useless piece of shit in teamfights, because the hero's base kit already allows him to be insanely useful outside of teamfights. Okay, last but not least, I want to do a lightning round where I quickly show you some late game tricks to be a piece of shit on this hero. Trick 1. If you cut waves, consider dragging them to in front of their base first, then killing them, because it can turn backdoor protection off. Trick 2. Consider dragging waves with small treants until you have a super wave, then ult it and farm it with big trees. Trick 3. Don't TP out instantly when you TP in. You can send many rounds of big treants before the enemy team will find you. Don't waste your TP scroll cooldown. Trick 4. If this is happening in one lane, then don't TP here. It can be tempting, but if you TP here instead, the enemy team has to choose between dealing with you and dealing with this wave, meaning that you can waste 2 heroes' time instead of just 1. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Good luck not getting reported, and, well, you're probably going to win, so I won't say good luck with that.